You've built a $3 million retirement portfolio and you feel fine. You should be able to retire, no problem. And the conventional wisdom says that the 4% rule means you can safely spend $120,000 a year. And I've watched this so-called safe rule really destroy retirements. If you're serious about making your wealth last and you want to see some real case studies, feel free to subscribe or to make sure to watch next week's video. Let me show you exactly why the 4% rule doesn't necessarily work all the time. There are two factors that often decide whether your money lasts 20 years or 40 years. First, let me tell you about two couples who had nearly identical portfolios and they ended up in very different places. After working with similar families for over 30 years, I've seen both sides. Some follow the 4% rule religiously and they run out of money by their mid-70s. Others, they spend more freely and surprisingly, they just never touch the principal. And the difference really isn't luck, it's knowing what determines how long your money lasts. The 4% rule is so common, but nobody tells you about the 4% rule. It really assumes that your portfolio grows at a steady 7% every single year. But markets don't work like that. Markets are up 12%, they're down 6%, they're up 8%, they're down 10%, they're flat. So if you retire just before a market crash like 2008 or 2022, that 4% rule, that neat little formula, it can fall apart really quickly. Now let me tell you why it matters. A 20% market drop in your first year of retirement, it does permanent damage. The same drop in year 15, it doesn't matter. You'll probably be fine. You see, early losses, they shrink the base that you're withdrawing from, and that damage, it can compound for decades. So there's two couples I mentioned earlier that they both retired at $3 million. We have the Johnsons, who retired in January of 2007, and the Smiths, they waited until 2009. Pretty generic names, Johnsons and Smiths. There was the same portfolio and the same spending plan. You see, the Johnsons, they retired just in time for the 2008 financial crisis. So their $3 million unfortunately dropped to $2.4 million while they were pulling out the $120,000 or the 4% per year. Within 3 years, they had cut their lifestyle dramatically because of that bad timing. And the Smiths, one of my favorite bands, the Smiths actually retired after the crash. You see, they bought assets at lower prices. They bought it while they were down. And they went up over the first years of the retirement and they really never looked back. So 20 years later, because of that timing, they're spending more than they originally planned. It was the same market, right? They were in the stock market, they had some bonds, but it was just different timing. The Johnsons, they got unlucky, but they could have done things differently. They didn't have to lock themselves into rigid budgets. They can build flexibility. They can sustain a baseline lifestyle that they can always maintain. But that only works if we're creating a plan that is very flexible. See, we can create discretionary spending that they can dial back in lean years or increase in good years. And by doing it right, they can have a plan for healthcare costs that typically spike after age 75. None of this matters if you miss the two biggest factors. And these two factors, they can add a decade to your retirement or they can cut it short by 15 years. The first is your actual withdrawal rate. Even 0.5% makes a huge difference. Dropping from 4% to 3.5%, it can add a full decade onto your retirement. For a $3 million portfolio, that's only $15,000 a year difference in what you're taking out. But if you actually take it even higher, if you go from 3.5 instead of 4 to 4.5, and you do it because you're going to be careful in the good years, that can actually mean you could run out of money at age 78, which is not a good deal. So when you're weighing decisions like these, when you're thinking about your retirement plan, you want to ask yourself, is an extra $15,000 a year today, is it really worth risking the final 10 years of retirement? So as I'm talking about this, if you want real clarity and you want to know what a really sound retirement plan looks like, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help, and I'd love to chat with you sometime. And if not, no big deal. The second factor I'm going to talk about, it really blindsides almost everyone, and that is taxes and withdrawal order, and they go together, those two. Most people, they start pulling out from their 401k or their IRA first because it feels so natural. But that choice, it really can cut years off of your retirement. If you draw from your tax-deferred accounts too early, you might run out of money. And the reason is that we're paying extra taxes early, and that leads to less money later on. But if we have a flexible sequence, a flexible withdrawal strategy, starting with taxable accounts while your income is high, and then using your traditional retirement accounts in the later years as your income goes down, and then also reserving some Roth withdrawals, right? So if you have a Roth IRA, we can reserve those Roth withdrawals for later in retirement, or you can use it for medical expenses. And just doing this correctly can save you $500,000 extra towards your portfolio by the age of 92. Same portfolio, same starting balance, but just very different outcomes simply because of timing and sequence. Now, of course, every situation is different. You might have a different tax bracket. You might live in a different state with high taxes, or maybe you have Social Security and you're trying to figure out what the best timing is. Well, that certainly can play a part. So back to the original question, can a $3 million portfolio safely fund $120,000 a year? For some families, the answer is absolutely. For others, it's maybe closer to $90,000. And for a few, we might even be able to pull out $140,000. You see, the difference isn't the size of the portfolio. It's whether you understand the factors that go into withdrawals, taxes, and timing. And the fact is probably no one has talked to you about these details before. $3 million gives you incredible options, but the only way to really spend confidently and still sleep well at night is a plan that is adaptable. It's a plan that we can change and we can move around based on what's happening in your financial life. It's a plan that accounts for market timing. It builds in flexibility and it optimizes tax decisions along the way. In retirement, peace of mind, being eligible to sleep well at night, it seems to me is worth more than any rule of thumb you'll find on the internet. So if you're looking for a flexible retirement plan, including withdrawal sequence, make sure you hit subscribe. If this helped you maybe think differently about your own retirement, make sure to comment below. I really do enjoy making these videos and I'd love to see you on the next one.